special address for the day, we have Dr. V.K. Dadwal. He's the director of Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology, who would be sharing his insights on geospatial technologies for water resource management. I welcome you, sir, and over to you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
It's a privilege to speak to distinguished audience. And also I would like to thank Agendra Kumarji, who asked me to make a presentation. It's called Special Lecture, Geospatial Technologies for Water Resource Management. So thank you, AGI, and thank you all the participants. I'm sure there will be a mixture of participants from industry, veterans, and some youngsters. So I now have a very challenging task. The water resource management is not for water itself, but if you look at the human society, there is a water energy, water environment, and water food nexus. So the resource management has to be done in a way that these things are met, whether it is hydropower, whether it is the ecosystem resources, or producing enough food. And we discussed that in the previous lecture with respect to groundwater. Now, the water resource availability is highly variable in space and time. So the resource management also has to be, disaggregated, and it has to be planned at daily, seasonal, and annual scale. And so there are risks and capacity, including the institutional capacity. So this makes a water resource management a truly, I would say, multi and interdisciplinary problem, and not given to very easy solution. There are good practices and there are good case studies. So it is still a challenge to really do it in some targeted sense. Now, where we are all familiar with the natural water cycle, which consists of evaporation, cloud movement, precipitation, runoff, and underground storage. But unfortunately, the human impacted water cycle is quite complicated. The human beings have created water storages which are separate. The water storages also have their own issues with respect to the quality of water. There is an urban ET. In fact, if you really look at the amount of water used to wash your cars, and if the amount of water used to do in the urban areas, your garden, you can understand the urban ET. Agriculture has very high ET. Then there are groundwater, including the contamination. Both unconfined and confined aquifer is there. So once human beings interact with natural environment, and it is so varying spatially, the geospatial data, which can be from space and ground-based sensors, this is a must for resource assessment, utilization, and planning. You would also see, in comparison to other applications like land cover, which are static, there are fluxes. So fluxes are very difficult to measure. So pure optical data cannot be really used for measuring fluxes. So there are natural fluxes and human fluxes, although surface area of agriculture, water, etc. This makes it another challenge. So now let us look at what I thought I could do. If I look at some of the topics addressed in the program sheet, I have a lot of things like watershed management, clean drinking water, groundwater, sustainable water management, hazard mitigation, technology adoption, pipeline network, interlinking, river rejuvenation, water conservation, risk. A lot of things are there. I have also spent more than past 3 decades in working with many areas, including irrigation management, water use efficiency, crop simulation, agrometeorological indices, floods, watershed, hydrological modeling, water-based soil erosion, evapotranspiration, drought, soil moisture, rainfall landslides, and lastly in NRSC with respect to disaster management, preparing our data sets, all things available on Bhuvan water resources, automated mapping, flood models, groundwater quality, water resource information system. But you have already very distinguished speakers in CWC, NRSC, IARS, SAC, and so many places. So I have decided to not to go into all the areas listed above. I would just use the limited time available to talk of the rapid advances in geospatial technology. I started doing remote sensing somewhere in 83. So 37, 38 years, we have seen huge changes. So I would like to really use my time to cover that. So the global observing system of water cycle is really very, very complex. It has geostationary satellite, it has polar satellites. Now CubeSats are coming up. There are also instruments on International Space Station. The satellite mission, which is shown in the center, is a GRACE, a gravity mission, which I will come. A lot of high altitude balloons and other meteorological balloons measure the vertical distribution. On ocean, there are a large number of research vessels and oceanic buoys. And then, of course, the traditional rain gauge and water, weather, soil stations, and tethered balloon. Even with all this, without some sort of data integration modeling, you won't be able to meet any of the globally consistent data need. I'll just like to show you one. Let us talk of precipitation. Precipitation is an instantaneous event. If you have optical data, you actually measure the cloud top temperature and use the correlation. But the way to measure precipitation is the hydrometeor, the droplet. But you must do it in a time sampling to cover the rain. So that comes from 97 onward, tropical rain measuring mission. So you can see there are now Ka and Ku band radars, which were in TRMM. Then there were precipitation radar. They were carried over to the GPM mission, as well as the CloudSat had some of the missions which had a train of satellite. What is now planned future is the W band for Earth Care. JAXA Japanese will also develop specifically for water. But most interesting has been, in comparison to all these big satellites, NASA has flown last year a rain cube. It is a CubeSat, less than 10 kg, which deploys a radar antenna and measures rain rate. The advantage of this, such type of CubeSats is you can launch hundreds of them. You must all be aware of the Planet Labs. They have more than 150 such doors, and they can actually cover the entire globe daily, almost 14 million pictures. So the precipitation challenge has actually been tackled, although initial was only the thermal data and the visible data. Now, as of now, if you look at, it's just a recent paper, with the ground weather stations, you have daily data, but as of now, even at the resolution of 0.1 degree and even better, a mixture of satellite-based and gauge-corrected data allows sub-daily precipitation. So you can see in the temporal resolution, there are already 3 hourly and 6 hourly data. And one data, which is the IMER GDF, it's a 30-minute, it is available from 2014 onward. So what I'm trying to say is the level of data availability has enhanced so much, but the caution is you must check whether it is giving good information over your case study. Now, once you have such a data and you have so many satellites over past decades. Now there are high resolution surface water sets. So already prepared by automatic techniques, surface water at native resolution, available on cloud, or you can use Google and other cloud and put a algorithm and map. So you can then get the previous surface water, but this surface water would only be of monthly or sub-monthly scale. It will not match the daily scale what we talked of precipitation. So now there is a challenge of merging these two to really interpolate and derive more information. I'll cover one such aspect. But if you come to the entire aspects of the water cycle, so water over land in terms of mapping river, lakes, getting the groundwater resources, soil moisture, over ice, snow water equivalent ice caps, over atmosphere, water vapor, liquid, the solid, the snowfall and the cloud, and you can use even the GPS to get the, and over ocean, you have the water salinity and evaporation. All these high resolution products as are available, but global and consistent time series data set are becoming increasingly available, but across the various parameter, they may not be consistent. So the challenge is how we could make them consistent. So once you have the water, you have the surface water, as has been pointed out, it is the challenge of water quality. This summarizes, reviews a large number of remote sensing based water quality studies. You can roughly see the number of studies presented and what are the parameters these studies cover: chlorophyll, the suspended solid, the clarity, the dissolved organic matter, nutrients, turbidity, carbon, cyanobacteria, and other algae, sediments, metals, color, chromaticity, and trophic state, the ecostatus. And if you look over time, what you would note is from the left side, what you see is the number of studies now lakes and river. Earlier were mostly with respect to lakes, but now the river data more and more is available. And if you look at the other panel, the modeling approach have more become semi-analytical and machine learning. If you would really see the increase in the green. As far as the coverage is concerned, it's 10 raised to power 5 to a million square kilometer by 2017. And if you look at the study duration, now there are many studies which are above 5 years. So now we are able to map trends 5 year to 10 year by semi-empirical analytical machine learning technique of the water quality, surface water quality. For some of the parameter, of course, the accuracy here is not presented, but it really tells in which direction the geospatial technologies are going. So let us look color data set. This is a 18-year data set. This has been released very recently, 2021 only, published in the scientific data. So it is a color index using chromaticity, and the average over 18 years is shown from LeGET 1 to 21. And if you see the lower panel, I'm showing over Lake Ontario, Canada. This index called Forel-Ulle index is very much related to the turbidity from Maris data, hyperspectral data, as well as the total suspended matter. So now there are more composite indices of the water quality becoming available.
Sir, 2 more minutes, please.
Yeah, okay. So if you look at the all available data set of the surface water and hydrology, you would immediately note that below 100 meter and temporal resolution of monthly scale, there is only one GSW index. But if you come seasonal and between 250 to 1000 meter, a large number of data set covering hydrological dynamics, vulnerability, baseline, hydrological extreme, and water management are already available from geospatial technique. Now, if you measure gravity, which is the most recently new type of data over 2002 to 17, over so many areas of globe, the gravity changes have been used. This total gravity gives the total mass. So it is the groundwater which has been quantified in different parts of the world, and each total signal involves a very large signal and a smaller long-term trend. From the trends, you can find out where there are large. Of course, over the pole, it is the ice loss, both Greenland and Alaska. So since we are covering, I think I'm reaching end of the time. One of the new exciting thing is to use the UAV over rivers to have the UAV assisted autonomous sampling. And the other I would like to say is, given all this data and data with various volume, variety, and velocity, you can do a large number of applications with distributed model and over disaster, smart city, and a couple of things. And I have listed some of the uh, big data and cloud sites and their addresses where such data is available, where you can do them either open as C means on the commercial basis. Thank you very much. I hope this conveys to you the excitement and the changes which are happening in the geospatial field for water resources management. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for such a comprehensive presentation. It's really like a resource that we can always refer to for for the geospatial technologies role in water resource management.